February 1st, 1943. Biskra Airfield, Algeria.
The 414th Bombardment Squadron, 97th Bomb Group, was preparing for a routine mission. Target.
Among them was B-17F, serial number 4124406, nicknamed All-American.
A crew of 10 men averaged just 23 years old. The pilot, Lieutenant Kendrick Sonny Bragg, was 24.
The mission briefing was straightforward. Fly northeast to Tunis, drop bombs on the docks, return to Biskra. Flight.
None of them knew this would become one of the most famous flights in aviation history.
At 0730 hours, the 4 Wright Cyclone engines roared to life. One by one, the flying fortresses taxied into position.
The 28 bombers formed up and turned northeast toward their target, and toward a collision that would defy belief.
Formation flying was both a defensive tactic and a death sentence. Grouped together, the bombers' combined firepower could...
The crew scanned the skies. Enemy territory meant enemy fighters. And at 20,000 feet, there was nowhere to hide. At 10:15 hours, the formation reached Tunis. Below them, the docks teemed with German supply vessels. The bomb bay doors opened.
Bombardier Ralph Burbridge steadied his Norden bomb sight. Despite enemy flak exploding around them, the crew maintained their course. The bombs fell away.
Direct hits. Secondary explosions rippled through the harbor. The mission was a success. All-American turned for home with the rest of the formation.
For 90 seconds, the crew allowed themselves to relax. They had hit the target. They were heading home. In less than 2 hours, they'd be back in Biskra.
Then tail gunner Sam Sarpler spotted them. German fighters, Messerschmitt 109s, diving from above.
The Luftwaffe wasn't finished with them.
The All-American's gunners opened fire. Tracers stick across the sky. One German fighter broke off, smoking. The second dove past the formation.
The Messerschmitt's pilot, later identified as 16 Victory ace Erich Patzia, was dead or unconscious. The collision was catastrophic.
Lieutenant Bragg felt the aircraft lurch violently. Every instrument on the panel went haywire. The control yoke went slack in his hands.
Behind him, the fuselage opened like a zipper. A 4-foot wide gash, 16 feet long, split the bomber nearly in half.
The German fighter's wing had sliced diagonally through the aircraft, carrying away the entire left horizontal stabilizer.
All control cables were severed, the electrical system was destroyed, the oxygen system was gone. Both right engines were dead, and the left outboard engine was leaking oil.
In the tail, Sam Sarpler found himself in a separate aircraft. There was no floor connecting him to his crew. He was trapped.
Through his small window, he could see the tail flexing and bouncing with every movement of the aircraft. One wrong maneuver, and he would be riding a 20-foot piece of metal to his death.
Co-pilot, Lieutenant damage report. Called out the damage reports coming from the crew.
Flight engineer Joe James made his way aft to assess the damage. What he saw should have been impossible.
Bragg faced an impossible decision. Order the crew to bail out and abandoning Sarpler, who couldn't reach the main fuselage.
He made his choice. They would try to fly her home. The formation commander ordered the other B-17s to stay with All-American. Every input had to be gentle. Too sharp a turn, and the tail would twist off. Too much throttle, and the airframe would vibrate apart. Bombardier Ralph Burbridge, who survived into his 90s, set the record straight. They wore their parachutes, ready to bail out if the aircraft failed. But they did find a solution to one critical problem: how to fly an aircraft with no control cables.
The Norden bomb sight, the top-secret device used to aim bombs, included an autopilot system. It used a...
Bragg engaged the bomb sight autopilot. The controls responded electrically.
But they weren't safe yet. 2 more German fighters spotted the crippled bomber and attacked.
The All-American gunners fought back, and the others fired from positions exposed to the slipstream. In the tail, Sarpelis faced an impossible situation. When he fired his guns, the recoil twisted the entire tail. The combined fire from All-American and her escorts drove off the German fighters. Once again, the formation protected one of...
All-American was slowly dying. With 2 engines out and a 3rd leaking oil, they were losing altitudes. They descended from 20,000 feet to 15,000, then 10,000. The thin structural members connecting...
Radio operator Paul Galloway sent repeater messages to Biskra. Aircraft severely down to base.
The crew had been at combat stations for over 2 hours. Their oxygen was gone.
Then, ahead, the North African coast appeared. They had made it out of enemy territory.
And the aircraft was telling them time was running out. The structural members were showing cracks. All-American had minutes left before Physics won.
As All-American drew closer, the full extent of the damage became visible. Ground crews who had seen hundreds of combat-damaged bombs.
Another B-17, the flying flit gun, pulled alongside. Navigator Cliff Cutforth grabbed his camera.
On the ground, ambulances and fire trucks stood ready. Based on the damage, they were expecting casualties. Ground...
The entire aircraft immediately sagged. Without the lift from flight, gravity took over. The fuselage dropped 3...
Bragg shut down the engines. In the sudden silence, he and his crew sat for a moment, processing what they had just accomplished.
Ground crews rushed to the aircraft, then stopped in disbelief. Maintenance Chief Highland walked around All-America 3 times. The crew climbed out. All 10 men, uninjured. Sam Sarpelis, who had ridden the tail section for...
They embraced, laughed, some cried. They had survived an experience that should have killed them all.
Look at the depth of this hairline fracture. It goes deeper than we estimated.
The stress readings confirm it. We have significant propagation here.
By every calculation, these members should have failed within minutes.
The damage assessment was staggering. 16 feet of fuselage, severed. The left horizontal stabilizer,
The damage assessment was staggering. 16 feet of fuselage, severed. The left horizontal stabilizer, complete.
Boeing engineers who later examined All-American called it aerodynamically impossible. The aircraft should have entered an uncontrollable spin within seconds of the collision.
The B-17 Flying Fortress earned its reputation for toughness through hundreds of such incidents. Aircraft returned.
Within hours, military photographers and newsreel cameras descended on Biskra.
The photographs appeared in newspapers across America. Life magazine ran the story. The All-American became a symbol of American determination, and
the resonant frequency is off here. We need to reinforce the strut.
Agreed. The stress fracture on the auxiliary joint is propagating faster than modeled.
The official determination came quickly. Beyond economical repair, the structural damage was too extensive.
Salvage crews stripped All-American of reusable parts. Her engines, instruments, guns, and radio equipment. She sat in the salvage yard at Biskra for months, a testament to what she had endured. Then, like thousands of...
The crew of All-American received recognition for their actions.
All 10 crew members survived the war. Pilot Kendrick Bragg returned home to Alabama. Sam Sarpelis went back to Pennsylvania.
They reunited multiple times over the decades. At these gatherings, they would inevitably discuss that day.
Bombardier Ralph Burbridge lived until 2007, reaching the age of 89. He spent his later years correcting myths about the flight.
We wore our parachutes, he insisted. We were ready to bail out if we had to. but we never used them to repair the air.
Today, that image is displayed in aviation museums worldwide. It represents not just one remarkable.
The B-17's survival wasn't just luck. Boeing engineers had designed redundancy into every system.
Modern engineering analysis reveals that the 4 stringers supporting All-American's tail were distributing the load in ways the original design.
All-American wasn't alone. The B-17 Thunderbird landed with its nose section destroyed. The bomber Lady Luck.
Statistics bear this out. While no bomber was safe in combat, B-17 crews had significantly higher survival rates.
This reliability created an emotional bond between crews and their aircraft. They trusted their fortresses.
Virginophiles. Between 1946 and 1945, Boeing and its partners built 1,737.
The real story of the B-17 wasn't just about individual miraculous survivals. They destroyed factories, rail yards, and oil refineries. More importantly, they forced Germany to divert thousands of Albert Speer, Germany's armaments minister, later wrote that the bombing campaign was the greatest lost battle of the entire war. But the cost was staggering. Over 46,000 bomber crew members were casualties, killed,
For the veterans who survived, the B-17 remained a powerful symbol. Many spent their later years volunteering.
Today, only a handful of B-17s remain airworthy. Organizations like the Commemorative Air...
Imagine being the ball turret gunner, suspended in a plexiglass sphere beneath the aircraft, or the tail gunner, isolated at the end of the fuselage.
Which brings us back to All-American. When we understand what a B-17 was, what it could withstand, and what it couldn't the fact...
Lieutenant Bragg didn't just land an airplane, he threaded a needle. Too fast and the tail tears off, too slow and they stall, too sharp a descent and structural failure.
Modern pilots, using flight simulators with All-American's damage parameters, have attempted to recreate the landing.
But skill alone doesn't explain their survival. The crew worked as a unit. Engineer Joe James providing critical damages.
The other bombers in the formation played their role too. They could have left All-American behind, maintained their speed, and gotten home.
In bomber crews, you didn't leave anyone behind. You covered for each other. You sacrificed for...
This is why All-American matters. Not just because of the dramatic photograph. Not just the...
Today's students see the photograph and ask, how is that possible? The answer isn't in the physics alone. It's in the
rings. Modern aerospace engineering has learned from aircraft like All-American. Today's designs include explicit fail-safe.
The engineers who designed the B-17 never intended it to survive the damage All-American sustained. But they built in
And the factory workers, many of them women, who riveted every seam, torqued every bolt, and inspected every part.
So when we look at that photograph again, the impossible image of a severed B-17 still flying, we're seeing more than a mechanic.
The original negative was preserved in the National Archives. Copies were sent to Boeing, to the Army Air Forces, to war bond drives across America.
The military used All-American's story strategically. It proved to the American public that their tax dollars and war bonds were building aircraft. Lieutenant Bragg returned to Alabama a hero. His hometown newspaper ran the story with the headline, "Local Boy..."
Bragg continued flying after the war, though nothing in his career ever matched that February day. He passed.
I could see the metal bending. Every time the tail moved, I thought, this is it. But I kept firing those guns.
He spent his final years making sure the myth didn't overtake the reality. The truth is dramatic enough.
His insistence on accuracy has paid off. Today's historians and aviation enthusiasts know the real story.
Aviation safety engineers still study All-American. The incident appears in textbooks about fail-safe design, damage tolerance, and crew resource management.
Every modern aircraft that can safely continue flying after damage owes something to the lessons of the B-17.
Modern materials science has created structures far stronger than the aluminum alloy of All American.
The crew of All American earned their place in aviation history alongside the Wright brothers, Charles Lindbergh. If you look up at contrails crossing the sky today, remember that every safe flight stands on the shoulders of crews like All Americans.
The strengths. Schools teach the story of All American as an example of problem solving under pressure. Students learn about aerodynamics.
Engineering students calculate the stresses, model the damage, and invariably reach the same conclusion. All American survival violated theoretical limits.
The generation that flew the B-17s is nearly gone. The last crew members are in their late 90s or have passed.
Historians race to preserve these stories. The National Archives has digitized millions of pages of mission reports. Museums use modern technology to preserve the remaining flying fortresses. Laser scanning creates perfect digital model. Virtual reality allows new generations to experience what bomber crews faced. Students put on headsets and find them. All American's story transcends national boundaries. Aviation museums in Britain, France, and Germany display the photographs.
Even the German pilot, Erich Paxia, is remembered with respect. He was a skilled aviator doing his...
The B-17 Flying Fortress represents a specific moment in history. For 4 years, these bombers
They were replaced by the B-29, then the B-36, B-52, and modern stealth bombers. But
today, monuments to the 8th Air Force stand in England, where most missions originated.
The annual B-17 reunions continue, though now attended mostly by children and grandchildren of the original crew. When a restored B-17 takes off today, spectators stop and watch. There's something about the sound of those. When vintage warbirds fly the missing man formation, one aircraft peeling away from the group, it's for the crews who didn't come home.
All American's crew were the lucky ones. They survived a collision that killed the enemy pilot and should have killed them. They landed safely when the laws of physics said they would crash.
But their survival doesn't diminish the sacrifice of those who weren't as fortunate. If anything, it highlights...
Today, when we see a B-17 silhouetted against a peaceful sky, we're seeing a weapon of war transformed into a symbol of remembrance.
And we return to the photograph, the impossible image. The B-17 that flew home, cut in half.
It reminds us that courage and skill can overcome impossible odds, that excellent engineering matters.
Lieutenant Kendrick Bragg and his crew of All American showed us what was possible. They refused to accept defeat.
That is their legacy. Not just a famous photograph, but a lesson in human potential that resonates 80 years later.